The morning sun on Nexus Prime cast long shadows across the Galactic Academy's crystal towers. Students from dozens of worlds moved through the halls, their different forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes. Some walked on legs, others floated, and a few rolled along the smooth floors. Tae-Ho Kim sat in his usual spot in the back row of the xenobiology classroom. He was one of only 3 humans at the academy, and his classmates had learned to expect the unexpected from him. While other students jumped at sudden noises or strange smells, Tae-Ho would just smile and ask questions. So Min Park floated beside him, her ethereal body shimmering like morning mist. She was his study partner and one of the few students who wasn't nervous around humans. Her people were made of pure energy, so they didn't scare easily. But even she sometimes wondered how Tae-Ho's mind worked. "Did you finish reading about the Vorthon breeding cycles?" So-Min asked, her voice like wind chimes. "Yeah, pretty interesting stuff," Tae-Ho replied, flipping through his tablet. "Though I still don't understand why they need 17 different genders. Seems complicated." Dongwoo Lee, who sat in front of them, turned around. His crystalline body caught the light and threw rainbow patterns on the wall. "Humans only have 2 genders, right? That must be very limiting." "Not really," Tae-Ho shrugged. "We make it work." The classroom slowly filled with students. There was Yujin Choi from the water world of Aquatica, her blue skin glistening under the lights. Next to her sat a group of insectoid students whose names Tae-Ho could never pronounce correctly. In the corner, 3 plant-like beings from the forest planet Verdania swayed gently, their leaves rustling with quiet conversation. Professor Velthar entered the room with his usual clicking steps. The insectoid teacher was tall and thin, with 4 arms that moved independently as he organized his materials. His large compound eyes could see in all directions at once, which made it impossible for students to pass notes without being caught. "Good morning, class," Professor Velthar said, his mandibles clicking as he spoke. "Today we begin our study of predator species and their hunting adaptations." Several students shifted nervously in their seats. Predator studies always made everyone uncomfortable except for Tae-Ho, who leaned forward with interest. "But first," the professor continued, "I have an announcement. We have a new student joining us today." The room went quiet. Mid-semester transfers were rare at the academy. Most species needed time to adjust to new environments, and the screening process was very strict. "This student comes from a species we have never had at the academy before," Professor Velthar explained. "I want everyone to remember our rules about respect and inclusion. All students here have earned their place through merit." Tae-Ho noticed that the professor's antennae were twitching, which usually meant he was nervous. Around the room, other students were showing signs of stress. The plant students had pulled their leaves closer to their bodies. Yujin's gills were fluttering rapidly. Even So-Min's usually bright glow had dimmed slightly. "What species?" asked one of the insectoid students, his voice high and worried. "Professor?" Velthar paused before answering. "Shadowkin." The reaction was immediate. Half the class gasped. 3 of the smaller students actually fell out of their chairs. The plant beings rustled so loudly it sounded like a windstorm. Yujin made a squeaking noise and tried to hide behind her desk. "A Shadowkin?" Dongwoo's crystal body flickered with alarm. "Here? At the academy?" "That's impossible," whispered another student. "They never leave their homeworld, and when they do—" The student didn't finish the sentence, but everyone knew what he meant. Shadowkin were the stuff of nightmares. Across the galaxy, They were assassins, killers who could walk through walls and drive people insane with fear. Their homeworld was a death trap, where almost no visitors survived. Most species had laws against allowing Shadowkin into their territory. "I understand your concerns," Professor Velthar said, raising one of his hands for quiet. "But this student has been cleared by the highest levels of Academy security. They are here to learn, just like all of you." "But Professor," So-Min said, her voice shaking, "my people's legends say that Shadowkin can steal souls. They can make you see your worst fears." "Those are just stories," the professor replied, though his antennae were still twitching. "We must not judge based on prejudice." "It's not prejudice if it's true," muttered one of the insectoid students. "My cousin was on a transport ship when a Shadowkin came aboard. Half the crew went insane just from being in the same room." Tejo listened to all of this with growing curiosity. He had never heard of Shadowkin before, but they sounded fascinating. A species that could phase through solid matter? That was like something from a superhero movie. "When will we meet them?" Tejo asked. The entire class turned to stare at him. Professor Velthar's compound eyes focused on the human student. "You're not concerned?" the professor asked carefully. "Should I be?" Tejo replied. "I mean, they're just another student, right? Probably nervous about starting at a new school." The silence in the room was so complete that they could hear the air recycling system humming in the walls. No one seemed to know how to respond to Tejo's casual attitude. "They will be here shortly," Professor Velthar said finally. "Perhaps we should review some basic information about Shadowkin biology while we wait." The professor activated the holographic display at the front of the room. An image appeared, showing a tall, thin figure wrapped in what looked like living darkness. The shape seemed to shift and change even as they watched it. Shadowkin evolved on a world of perpetual darkness, the professor explained. Their bodies can alter their molecular density, allowing them to become intangible. They communicate through pheromone releases and can manipulate the fear responses of most other species. "Most other species?" Dongwu asked. "There are a few exceptions," the professor said, glancing at Tejo. "Species from high-stress environments sometimes show resistance to their psychological effects." Tejo nodded thoughtfully. Earth was definitely a high-stress environment. Between natural disasters, dangerous wildlife, and humans' general tendency to do stupid things for fun, his species had probably built up quite a tolerance for fear. Suddenly, the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. But something felt different. The air itself seemed thicker, harder to breathe. "They're here," So-Min whispered, her glow fading to almost nothing. The wall at the back of the classroom began to darken, as if a shadow was spreading across it. Then, impossibly, a figure stepped through the solid material as if it were made of water. The Shadowkin student was exactly as tall as the hologram had shown, but seeing one in person was completely different. They moved like liquid darkness, their form shifting between solid and something else entirely. Their face was hidden in shadows that seemed deeper than they should be, and when they looked around the room, students actually whimpered. Every species in the classroom reacted according to their instincts. The plant students curled into tight balls. Yujin dove under her desk. The insectoid students' wings buzzed in panic. Even Professor Velthar took a step backward. But Tai Ho looked at the new student stepping through the wall, tilted his head slightly and started laughing. Not just a chuckle or a nervous giggle, full, genuine laughter that echoed through the silent classroom. He laughed so hard that tears started forming in his eyes, and he had to wipe them away with the back of his hand. The Shadowkin students stopped moving entirely, their forms solidifying in apparent confusion. The rest of the class stared at Tae-ho, as if he had lost his mind completely. Through his laughter, Tae-ho managed to speak. Sorry, he gasped, still chuckling. It's just, you guys should see your faces. The classroom fell into a silence so deep that even the air recycling system seemed to hold its breath. Tae-ho continued wiping tears from his eyes, completely unaware of the shock waves his reaction had sent through the room. The Shadowkin student stood perfectly still near the wall they had just walked through. Their form had solidified completely, no longer shifting between states. This was unusual behavior for their species, who normally maintained constant movement to keep others off balance. Professor Velthar's mandibles opened and closed several times, but no sound came out. His 4 arms hung limply at his sides as he tried to process what had just happened. In his 40 years of teaching, he had never seen anything like this. "Human Tae-ho," the professor finally managed to say, his voice higher than usual. "Are you feeling well?" "I'm fine," Tae-ho replied, still grinning. "Just thought it was funny how everyone jumped. You should have seen Dongwoo's light show there. Very impressive." Dongwoo's crystalline body was indeed flickering through several colors rapidly, which happened when his species was extremely stressed. "You think this is funny?" he asked, his voice cracking. "That's a Shadowkin." "Yeah, I can see that," Tae-ho said calmly. "Cool trick with the wall-walking thing. How does that work exactly? Some kind of molecular phase shifting?" The Shadowkin student's head turned toward Tae-ho with movements that seemed too smooth, too fluid. When they spoke, their voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once, like whispers in an empty room. "You are not afraid." It wasn't a question. The Shadowkin sounded genuinely puzzled, as if Tae-ho had just announced that water wasn't wet, or that space wasn't dark. "Should I be?" Tae-ho asked, tilting his head. "I mean, you're here to study, right? Same as the rest of us." So-min floated closer to Tae-ho, her ethereal form flickering with worry. "Tae-ho," she whispered urgently, "you don't understand. Shadowkin don't just kill people. They make them go insane first. They feed on fear." "That's not entirely accurate," Professor Velthar said, finally finding his voice. "Though I admit the distinction is often academic for the victims." Tae-ho looked back and forth between his friend and his teacher, then at the Shadowkin student. "Okay, but they're here at school. That means they passed all the same tests we did, right? Background checks, psychological evaluation, academic requirements?" "Well, yes," the professor admitted reluctantly. "So they're here to learn, not to hurt anyone." Tae-ho continued. "Makes sense to me." The door to the classroom slid open, and another human student rushed in. Jae-sung-yoon looked around the room, taking in the scene of terrified students and the dark figure standing by the wall. "What's going on?" Jae-sung asked. "I heard screaming from down the hall." "New student," Tae-ho explained cheerfully. "Everyone's being a bit dramatic about it." Jae-sung looked at the Shadowkin, then at his fellow human. "Tae-ho, that's a Shadowkin. So, everyone keeps telling me. They're one of the most dangerous species in the galaxy. So are humans," Tae-ho pointed out. "We're from a death world, remember? But that doesn't mean we're all bad." Jae-sung opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again. He had to admit that Tae-ho had a point. Humans did have a reputation across the galaxy as being unpredictable and dangerous. Most other species were. Nervous around them too, though not quite to this extent. The Shadowkin student moved closer to the front of the classroom. With each step, several students leaned away or made small sounds of distress, but they kept their attention focused on Tae-ho. "You compare yourself to me," the Shadowkin said, their voice still that strange whisper from nowhere. "This is unusual." "Is it?" Tae-ho asked. "I mean, we're both probably the only ones of our species here. That's gotta be weird, right? Being the odd one out all the time?" Professor Velthar cleared his throat loudly. "Perhaps we should begin with introductions. Class, this is—" He paused and looked at the Shadowkin student. "I'm sorry. How would you prefer to be addressed?" "I am called Kira 9, the Shadowkin replied. "Kira 9, Tae-ho repeated, testing the name. "Cool name. I'm Tae-ho. Nice to meet you." He started to stand up as if he was going to walk over and shake hands. The entire class reacted with gasps and small shrieks. Somin actually grabbed onto Tae-ho's arm with her energy tendrils. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "Physical contact with Shadowkin can cause hallucinations. Permanent ones." Tae-ho paused, looking at Kira 9. "Is that true?" Kira 9 was quiet for a long moment. When they spoke, their voice seemed less like whispers and more like a normal person speaking softly. "It is possible, if I choose to make it so." "But you wouldn't choose to do that to a classmate, right?" Tae-ho asked. Another pause. "No, I would not." "See?" Tae-ho said to Somin. "It's fine." He walked down the aisle toward Kira 9, ignoring the sounds of panic from his classmates. Professor Velthar started to move forward, as if to stop him, but then froze as he realized he didn't actually want to get between a human and a Shadowkin. When Tae-ho reached the front of the classroom, he stopped about an arm's length away from Kira 9. Up close, he could see that the Shadowkin wasn't actually made of darkness. Their skin was very pale, almost gray, and seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their eyes were completely black, like looking into deep space. "So, what's your homeworld like?" Tae-ho asked conversationally. "I've heard it's pretty dangerous." "It is," Kira 9 replied. "Most who visit do not leave alive." "Sounds like Earth," Tae-ho grinned. "My planet's trying to kill everything on it pretty much all the time. Earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, poisonous plants, predatory animals. Good times." Kira 9's head tilted slightly, a gesture that somehow seemed more human than alien. "You speak of death as if it is amusing." "Not amusing exactly," Tae-ho said thoughtfully. "But not terrifying either. I mean, everything dies eventually, right? Might as well have some fun while you're alive." The classroom had gone quiet again, but this time it was the silence of fascination rather than terror. No one had ever heard anyone have a casual conversation with a Shadowkin before. Yujin slowly peeked her head up from behind her desk. "He's actually talking to it," she whispered to Dongwu. "I can hear you," Kira 9 said without turning around. "I am not an it." Yujin's blue skin turned several shades darker with embarrassment. "Sorry, I didn't mean—" "It's okay," Tae-ho said quickly. "Everyone's just nervous. They'll get used to you." "Will they?" Kira 9 asked. "Others of my kind who have left our world report that fear never fades. It grows stronger with familiarity. Maybe they were hanging out with the wrong people," Tae-ho suggested. "Have you tried just being yourself instead of doing the whole scary intimidation thing?" Professor Velthar made a strangled sound. human Teho. Intimidation is not something Shadow can do intentionally. It is simply their natural presence that causes fear responses. Like how humans smell weird to some species? Teho asked. Or how we're too loud? Not exactly, the professor said weakly. Teho looked back at Kira 9. Well, you don't seem that scary to me. A little pale maybe, and the voice thing is interesting, but otherwise pretty normal. For the first time since entering the classroom, Kira 9's form wavered slightly, becoming less solid around the edges. It was a subtle change, but several students noticed it immediately. They're losing control, Dongwu whispered urgently. When Shadow can lose emotional control, bad things happen. But Teho had noticed something different. The wavering wasn't threatening or dangerous looking. If anything, Kira 9 seemed smaller somehow, less imposing. Are you okay? He asked quietly. Kira 9 solidified again quickly. I am functional. That's not the same thing as okay, Teho pointed out. First day at a new school is always rough. Everyone's staring at you, trying to figure out where you fit in. Must be even harder when everyone's scared of you before you even say hello. The Shadowkin was quiet for such a long time that Professor Velthar began to worry something was wrong. Finally, Kira 9 spoke in a voice so soft that only Teho could hear clearly. No one has ever asked if I was okay before. Teho smiled. Well, someone should have. Want to sit with me and So-Min? We can catch you up on what we've been studying. The entire class held its breath as Kira 9 considered this offer. Making friends with a Shadowkin was unthinkable. It simply didn't happen. I would like that, Kira 9 said finally. Cool, Teho said, as if he had just made plans to grab lunch instead of potentially changing galactic history. Come on, So-Min won't bite. She doesn't actually have teeth. As the three of them moved toward the back of the classroom, Professor Velthar realized he had completely forgotten about his lesson plan. Somehow, teaching predator biology seemed much less important than what was happening right in front of him. A human and a Shadowkin were about to become friends. The galaxy would never be the same. 2 weeks had passed since Kira 9 joined the xenobiology class, and the academy was still trying to figure out what to make of the situation. Students from other classes would find excuses to walk past their classroom, hoping to catch a glimpse of the impossible friendship between a human and a Shadowkin. Teho sat in the academy's central garden during lunch break, sharing his sandwich with So-Min, who absorbed nutrients through her energy form. Kira 9 sat beside them on the grass, their dark form creating an odd shadow in the bright sunlight. So let me get this straight, Teho said, taking a bite of his sandwich. Your planet has no sun at all? Correct, Kira 9 replied. We exist in eternal darkness. Light is painful for extended periods. But you're sitting in direct sunlight right now, So-Min pointed out, her ethereal form shimmering with curiosity. The pain is manageable, Kira 9 said quietly. This experience is worth the discomfort. Teho looked concerned. Hey, we can move to the shade if you want. No big deal. No, Kira 9 said quickly. I wish to understand what you call sunshine. On my world, we believe light to be hostile. But you seek it out, enjoy it. Well, yeah, Teho shrugged. Feels good, makes plants grow, helps us make vitamin D. Plus, it's pretty. The concept of finding light pretty was clearly foreign to Kira 9. They tilted their head in that now familiar gesture of confusion. You find illumination aesthetically pleasing? Don't you think anything is beautiful on your world? So-Min asked gently. Kira 9 was quiet for a moment. We find beauty in perfect silence, in shadows that move exactly as intended, in the moment when fear transforms into acceptance. That last one's kind of dark, Taeho said, then caught himself. Sorry, no pun intended. What is a pun? Kira 9 asked. Taeho spent the next 10 minutes trying to explain wordplay to someone whose species communicated through pheromones and subtle body language. It was like trying to describe color to someone who had never seen light. Mi Young Song approached their group hesitantly. The telepathic student usually avoided getting too close to Kira 9, as Shadowkin minds were difficult for her species to read. But her curiosity had finally overcome her caution. May I join you? She asked, her mental voice soft and polite. Of course, Taeho said, patting the grass beside him. We were just trying to explain jokes to Kira 9. Mi Young sat down, carefully keeping some distance from the Shadowkin. I've been monitoring the emotional atmosphere around the academy, she said quietly. Things have been different since Kira 9 arrived. Different how? So-Min asked. Fear levels have actually decreased, Mi Young said, sounding puzzled. Not just in your class, but across the entire academy. It's as if having one Shadowkin who isn't actively threatening has somehow made everything else seem less dangerous. Taeho looked at Kira 9. That's interesting. Any idea why that might be? Kira 9's form flickered slightly, a sign they were thinking deeply. My species projects what you might call fear aura, without conscious control. But perhaps, if I am not afraid, others sense this and feel safer. Are you afraid? Taeho asked directly. The question clearly surprised Kira 9. I do not know. Fear is not an emotion my kind discusses. We cause it, we do not experience it. But you must feel something, So-Min insisted. What did you feel when you first walked through that classroom wall? Kira 9 was quiet for so long that the others began to worry they had asked something too personal. Finally, they spoke in their softest voice yet. Loneliness, they said. I felt loneliness, and when the human laughed, I felt confused. No one had ever reacted to me with joy before. Mi Young's eyes widened. I can sense it now that you're talking about it. You're not projecting fear because you're not feeling fear. You're feeling curiosity and, is that contentment? I do not know these emotions well, Kira 9 admitted. My species learns to suppress such feelings early in life. That sounds awful, Taeho said bluntly. No wonder your people are so scary. If I couldn't feel happiness or curiosity, I'd probably be pretty grumpy too. The casual way Taeho discussed Shadowkin psychology continued to amaze his friends. He talked about Kira 9's species like they were just another culture with different customs, not living nightmares. Hyunwoo Nam, the third human student at the academy, walked over to their group. He was more cautious than Taeho by nature and had been watching the developing friendship with a mixture of fascination and concern. Mind if I sit? He asked, though he was already looking around for potential escape routes. Sure, Taeho said. Kira 9, this is Hyunwoo. He's also from Earth. Another human, Kira 9 observed. Will you also laugh at me? Hyunwoo looked confused. Should I? That's what Taeho did when we first met, Kira 9 explained. I am still trying to understand why. Hyunwoo looked at his fellow human. You laughed at a shadowkin? It was funny. Taeho defended himself. Everyone was so dramatically terrified. Like something out of a horror movie. Shadowkin are something out of a horror movie, Hyunwoo pointed out. Not Kira 9, Taeho said firmly. They're just different. Like how So-min is made of energy, or how Dongwoo is basically a living crystal. Everyone's different here. Mi-young was studying the emotional dynamics of the group with professional interest. Hyunwoo, your fear levels are elevated but manageable. You're scared, but you're also curious. And Taeho, she paused, looking puzzled. I've never seen emotional patterns like yours. What do you mean? Taeho asked. Most species, when they encounter something unknown, show fear first, then curiosity if the fear subsides. But you seem to skip the fear entirely and go straight to interest. It's like your brain doesn't process dangerous and threatening the same way others do. Maybe that's a human thing, Hyunwoo suggested, though he didn't sound entirely convinced. I don't react the same way Taeho does, So-min pointed out. And neither do you. Fair point, Hyunwoo admitted. Professor Velthar appeared at the edge of the garden, his compound eyes scanning the area until they located the unusual group. He approached with careful steps, still not entirely comfortable with the situation despite 2 weeks of evidence that Kira 9 posed no threat. Students, he said formally, I wanted to inform you that your joint project proposals have been approved. The class had been assigned to work in pairs to study predator-prey relationships across different ecosystems. Most students had chosen safe, well-documented species, but Taeho and Kira 9 had proposed something unprecedented, a study of fear responses in different species when exposed to shadowkin presence versus human presence. Really? Taeho asked excitedly. The ethics committee approved it? With extensive safety protocols, Professor Velthar said carefully. All test subjects must be volunteers, sessions will be closely monitored, and either participant can end the experiment at any time. What exactly are you planning to do? Hyunwoo asked. We want to test whether humans really are immune to shadowkin fear effects, or if it's just me being weird, Taeho explained, and also whether Kira 9 can learn to control their natural intimidation factor. You want to teach a shadowkin to be less scary? Mi-young asked, her mental voice full of disbelief. Why not? Taeho shrugged. People can learn to control their body language and vocal tone. Maybe shadowkin can learn to control their fear projection thing. Kira 9's form wavered with what the others were beginning to recognize as excitement. If I could choose when to project fear, I could interact with others without causing distress? Exactly, Taeho said. Think about it. You could make friends, join study groups, maybe even go to parties without everyone running away screaming. What is a party? Kira 9 asked. The question stopped everyone cold. A being from a species known across the galaxy, for their lethal capabilities, didn't know what a party was. Oh, we are definitely teaching you about parties, Taeho declared. That's going to be part of the project, too. Professor Velthar's mandibles clicked nervously. I'm not sure that falls under the scope of xenobiology research. Social behavior is part of biology, Taeho argued. Besides, if we're going to understand how different species interact, we need to study normal social situations too, not just fear responses. I would like to learn about parties, Kira 9 said quietly, and study groups, and friends. The simple honesty in their voice made everyone quiet for a moment. Here was a member of one of the most feared species in the galaxy, asking to learn about friendship like it was an alien concept, which Taeho realized it probably was. "Okay," he said, standing up and brushing crumbs off his pants. "New plan. We're going to throw you the best welcome party this academy has ever seen." "Taeho," Hyunwoo said urgently, "you can't throw a party for a Shadowkin. No one will come." "They will if we explain it right," Taeho said confidently. "We'll make it a cultural exchange event. Educational. Professor Velthar can even give us extra credit for it." The professor looked like he was developing a headache. "I don't think—" "Come on," Taeho continued. "When are any of these students going to get another chance to safely interact with a Shadowkin? This could be the learning experience of a lifetime." Kira 9 stood up as well, their tall form casting long shadows across the garden. "I would be honored to attend a party, even if no one else comes." "People will come," Taeho said firmly. "Trust me." As the group began walking back toward the academy buildings, Mi Young continued monitoring the emotional. Elder Thix moved slowly through the corridors of the academy, his ancient shell reflecting the soft lighting as he made his way to his office. At over 300 years old, the turtle-like being had seen many strange things during his time as dean, but nothing quite like what was happening with the human student and the Shadowkin. The door chimed as Taeho entered the dean's office. The room was filled with artifacts from dozens of worlds, gifts from grateful alumni and visiting dignitaries. Taeho had been here once before, during his orientation, and he still found it fascinating. "Please, sit," Elder Thix said, gesturing to a chair with one of his wrinkled hands. "We need to discuss your friendship with student Kira 9. Taeho settled into the chair, which adjusted automatically to his height. "Is there a problem? Because if this is about the party we're planning, we've already got approval from Professor Velthar and the Student Activities Committee." "It's not about the party," Elder Thix said, though his ancient eyes showed concern about that too. "Taeho, do you understand what a Shadowkin is? Really understand? They're from a dark world, they can phase through solid matter, and they accidentally scare people," Taeho said simply. "Kira 9 seems nice enough once you get to know them." Elder Thix was quiet for a moment, studying the young human. "Let me tell you something about galactic history, young one. In the past 500 years, there have been exactly 17 documented meetings between humans and Shadowkin." "Okay," Taeho said, not sure where this was going. 15 of those encounters ended in violence," Elder Thix continued. "The other 2 ended when both parties fled in opposite directions as fast as possible." Taeho frowned. "That doesn't sound right. Humans aren't that violent, and Kira 9 definitely isn't." "The violence wasn't always started by humans, Elder," Thix explained. "But you have to understand, Shadowkin have never encountered a species that didn't fear them. Their entire culture is built around being the ultimate predator. When they meet something that doesn't run away, they don't know how to react. So they attack? Usually, it's their natural response to something that doesn't behave as expected." Elder Thix leaned forward. "But you, Taeho, you laughed. No one has ever laughed at a Shadowkin before." Taeho shrugged. "It was funny. Everyone was so scared of someone who's basically just a really pale person with neat tricks." "That's exactly my point," Elder Thix said. "Do you know why humans are classified as Deathworlders? Because Earth is dangerous, right? Lots of natural disasters and predators and stuff." "Partly," Elder Thix agreed. "But it's more than that. Deathworlders are species that evolved on planets so hostile that they developed psychological traits that other species find disturbing. Tejo looked puzzled. Like what? Like finding dangerous situations exciting instead of terrifying, Elder Thix explained. Like forming emotional bonds with creatures that want to kill you. Like treating life-threatening events as entertainment. That sounds like humans, Tejo admitted. Your species jumps out of flying vehicles for fun, Elder Thix pointed out. You intentionally seek out dangerous animals to observe them. You climb mountains that could kill you just to see the view from the top. When you put it like that, we do sound kind of crazy, Tejo said thoughtfully. Not crazy, Elder Thix corrected, adapted. Your world forced your species to develop a very different relationship with danger and death than most others. Where we see threats to be avoided, you see challenges to be overcome. So that's why I wasn't scared of Kira 9? Exactly. Your brain doesn't process fear the same way other species do. You see a legendary assassin from a nightmare world, and your first instinct is curiosity, not terror. Tejo considered this. Is that bad? Not bad, Elder Thix said carefully. But it has consequences that you might not understand. Since you befriended Kira 9, we've received some interesting reports. The Dean activated a holographic display showing a star map. Several sectors were highlighted in different colors. These are regions with known Shadowkin activity, Elder Thix explained. For the past 2 weeks, something unprecedented has been happening. Shadowkin requests for transfer away from human-populated sectors have dropped to 0. What does that mean? It means your species is having an effect on theirs, Elder Thix said. Somehow, your interaction with Kira 9 is being felt across their entire civilization. Tejo stared at the star map. How is that possible? Shadowkin are more connected to each other than most species understand. They share what you might call a collective unconscious, experiences and emotions that spread through their entire race. When one Shadowkin learns something new, others can sense it. So when Kira 9 experiences friendship, other Shadowkin become aware that such a thing is possible, Elder Thix finished. For a species that has never known anything but fear and isolation, this is revolutionary. Tejo sat back in his chair, trying to process this information. I just wanted to be nice to a new student. I know, Elder Thix said gently, and that simple kindness may have changed the course of galactic history. That's a lot of pressure, Tejo said quietly. Which is why I wanted to speak with you, Elder Thix explained. You need to understand the responsibility you've taken on. Kira 9 isn't just your friend. They're a bridge between two species that have never successfully coexisted. What if I mess it up? Then you mess it up, Elder Thix said simply. But the fact that you're worried about it tells me you probably won't. Just continue being yourself, Tejo. Your natural human response to treat everyone as equals may be exactly what the galaxy needs. Tejo was quiet for a moment, thinking about everything he'd learned. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why are you telling me this? Wouldn't it be easier to just let me keep being ignorant? Elder Thix smiled, an expression that looked strange on his turtle-like features. Because knowledge is always better than ignorance, even when it's uncomfortable. And because I've been watching you and Kira 9 together, you treat them with genuine respect and kindness, not because you don't understand what they are, but because you see past what they are to who they are. Kira 9 is pretty great once you get to know them, Tejo said. They're curious about everything. They ask really thoughtful questions, and they're surprisingly funny once they get the hang of humor. That's exactly what I mean, Elder Thix said. You see an individual, not a stereotype. Isn't that how everyone should treat people? It is, Elder Thix agreed. But most species, when faced with something that could kill them, tend to focus on the danger rather than the person. Humans seem to be uniquely capable of seeing past surface threats to find common ground. Maybe because we're used to everything being dangerous, Tejo suggested. On Earth, even the cute animals can kill you. You learn to judge individuals rather than species pretty quickly. A wise adaptation, Elder Thix said, and one that may serve the galaxy well. Tejo stood, up to leave, then paused. Elder Thix? What was Kira Nine's life like before they came here? The Dean's expression grew sad. Lonely, I imagine. Shadowkin society doesn't encourage individual relationships. They're taught from birth that they are tools of fear, nothing more. Kira 9 was actually considered defective by their people because they couldn't properly terrorize their targets. Defective? Tejo's voice was sharp with anger. There's nothing defective about Kira 9. I agree, Elder Thix said. But their society saw it differently. They were essentially exiled to the academy as a last resort, a way to remove a broken Shadowkin from their world without actually killing them. Tejo felt a surge of protective anger. So they were sent here expecting to fail, expecting to be alone and miserable until they eventually left, Elder Thix confirmed. I don't think anyone expected a human to befriend them. Well, they're not alone anymore, Tejo said firmly, and they're definitely not defective. No, Elder Thix agreed, watching the young human's fierce loyalty with approval. They're not. As Tejo left the office, Elder Thix turned back to his star map. The old dean had lived long enough to see many changes in the galaxy, but he had a feeling that this particular change would be remembered for centuries to come. A human had done the impossible. They had made friends with a Shadowkin, and in doing so, they had opened a door that no one had even known existed. Meanwhile, in the Academy's library, Kira 9 sat surrounded by books about human culture, trying to understand the species that had shown them kindness for the first time in their life. They were reading about something called birthday parties when they felt it, a subtle shift in the collective consciousness of their people. For the first time in Shadowkin history, the shared emotional network that connected their species carried something other than fear and isolation. It carried hope and curiosity and the faint but growing possibility that maybe, just maybe, they didn't have to be alone anymore. Kira 9 smiled, an expression their species had never learned, and went back to reading about friendship. The alarm system screamed through the academy corridors, its piercing sound echoing off the crystal walls. Students ran in panic toward the emergency shelters as security officers shouted instructions. The peaceful learning environment had been shattered by an attack no one had expected. Tejo grabbed Somin's energy form as they were pushed along by the crowd of fleeing students. "What's happening?" he shouted over the noise. "Pirates!" Dongwu called back, his crystalline body flashing. Urgent red warnings. "They broke through the defense grid!" Through the massive windows that lined the main corridor, they could see 3 large ships hovering outside the academy. Dark figures were already moving through the gardens, heading toward the main buildings. The academy's security forces were putting up a fight, but they were outnumbered. "Everyone to the shelters!" Security Chief Dorn's voice boomed through the communication system. "This is not a drill! All students report to designated safe zones immediately!" The crowd surged forward, carrying Tejo and his friends along. But as they passed a side corridor, Tejo suddenly stopped. "Wait," he said, pulling back against the flow of students. "Tejo, we have to go!" So-Min urged, her form flickering with fear. "Where's Kira 9? Tae-ho asked, looking around frantically. "I don't see them anywhere." Hyunwoo appeared beside them, breathing hard. "They're probably already in the shelters. Shadowkin are good at getting places unseen." "No," Tae-ho said firmly. "Kira 9 wouldn't have gone without us. They're still somewhere in the academy." Jae-sung pushed through the crowd to reach them. "Tae-ho, we need to move. The pirates are getting closer." "I'm not leaving without Kira 9, Tae-ho declared. "You guys go ahead, I'll catch up." "Don't be stupid," Hyunwoo said. "What can you do against space pirates?" Tae-ho looked at his fellow human with a grin that was pure human recklessness. "I don't know yet, but I'll figure something out." Before anyone could stop him, Tae-ho broke away from the group and ran back down the corridor toward the academic buildings. Behind him, he could hear his friends arguing about whether to follow or continue to safety. He found Kira 9 in their xenobiology classroom, standing perfectly still near the windows. The Shadowkin was watching the approaching pirates with an expression that was impossible to read. "There you are," Tae-ho said, rushing into the room. "We need to get to the shelters." Kira 9 turned slowly to look at him. "Why did you come back?" "Because you're my friend," Tae-ho said simply. "Friends don't leave each other behind." "The logical action would be to ensure your own safety," Kira 9 pointed out. "Yeah, well, humans aren't always logical," Tae-ho replied. "Now come on, let's go." But Kira 9 didn't move. "Tae-ho, what do you know about space pirates?" They're bad guys who steal stuff and hurt people." "They are predators," Kira 9 said quietly. "They understand only fear and strength. They attack places like this, Academy, because they believe educational institutions are soft targets." "Okay, so they have never encountered a Shadowkin," Kira 9 said, their form beginning to shift and darken. "And they certainly have never encountered a human who treats a Shadowkin as family." Tae-ho felt a chill run down his spine, but not from fear. It was excitement. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting," Kira 9 said, their voice dropping to the whisper-from-nowhere tone they had used on their first day, "that these pirates are about to learn something new about what happens when you threaten our friends." Before Tae-ho could respond, the classroom door burst open. So-Min, Dongwoo, Yoo-jin, Mi-young, Hyunwoo, and Jae-sung all rushed in together. "We're not leaving you behind either," So-Min announced, her ethereal form blazing with determination. "This is crazy," Hyunwoo protested, even as he took a defensive position near the door. "We're students, not soldiers. These are our friends and teachers," Tae-ho said, echoing the words he'd spoken to Elder Thix weeks ago. "We protect what matters." Kira 9 looked around at the group of students who had chosen to stay rather than flee to safety. For a moment, their dark form wavered with emotion. "You would fight beside a Shadowkin?" they asked quietly. "We'd fight beside our friend," Dongwoo corrected, his crystal body shifting to a harder, more protective configuration. "Besides," Yoo-jin added, her blue skin taking on a camouflage pattern, "you're not the only one here with useful abilities." Mi-young nodded, her telepathic senses already reaching out to monitor the pirates' positions. "I can track their movements and emotions. They're confident right now, but that could change." Jae-sung pulled out his emergency communicator. "I can coordinate with security forces if we can get in range." "Okay," Tae-ho said, his human mind already working on tactics. "So we've got stealth, camouflage, telepathy, communications, and—" He looked at Kira 9. "What exactly can you do in a fight?" Kira Nine's form solidified into something more imposing than any of them had ever seen. I am Shadowkin. I am fear made manifest. I am the nightmare that hunts nightmares. Cool. Tejo grinned. Let's go scare some pirates. The group moved through the academy like a unit that had been training together for years instead of weeks. Mi Young guided them around patrol groups. Yujin scouted ahead with her natural camouflage, and Kira 9 used their phasing abilities to disable security locks and defensive systems that the pirates had commandeered. But it was Tejo who provided the leadership that held them together. Where other species might have panicked or frozen in the face of overwhelming odds, the human treated the situation like a challenging puzzle to be solved. 3 guards at the main entrance, Mi Young reported. They're nervous but confident. Kira 9, can you phase through the wall and come up behind them? Tejo asked. Easily. Great. When you appear, they'll probably panic. That's when Yujin moves in from the front. They won't see her coming if they're focused on you. What about the rest of us? So-Min asked. We wait for the all-clear, then move to the communications center, Tejo explained. Jae-Sung can contact security while the rest of us work on getting the defensive systems back online. The plan worked perfectly. The pirates, who had been expecting frightened students and ineffective resistance, found themselves facing something they had never encountered, a coordinated group that treated them as just another obstacle to overcome. Word spread quickly through the pirate force that something was wrong. Their easy target had turned into a nightmare scenario. Students were appearing out of nowhere, systems were failing mysteriously, and there were reports of a shadow demon that seemed to be everywhere at once. Captain Rax, the pirate leader, tried to restore order through his communicator. It's just students. How hard can it be to control a bunch of kids? The answer came when his advance team encountered Tejo's group in the central hub of the academy. The human student stood in the middle of the room, completely calm, surrounded by his friends. Behind him, Kira 9's form seemed to fill the entire space with living darkness. You guys should probably leave, Tejo said conversationally. You're making a lot of noise and disturbing our studies. The pirates raised their weapons, but something felt wrong. The human wasn't acting like a victim. He was acting like a predator who had found new prey. Shoot them, Captain Rax ordered. That's when several things happened at once. Kira 9 phased through solid matter to appear behind the pirates, their form radiating terror so intense that 2 of the attackers simply fainted. Yujin's camouflage made her invisible as she disabled their weapons with precision strikes. So-Min's energy form blazed with protective fury as she shielded her friends from return fire. But it was Tejo's reaction that broke the pirate's will to fight. As energy bolts flew around him, as his friends engaged in life-or-death combat, the human began to laugh, not nervous laughter or hysteria, pure, joyful laughter, as if he was having the time of his life. This is amazing, he called out to his friends. Kira 9, that thing you did with the wall was incredible. Yujin, I can barely see you even when I know where you are. The pirates stared in horror at a being who treated Mortal Kombat as entertainment. They had encountered many species across the galaxy, but never one that found violence genuinely fun. What is wrong with that human? One of them whispered. I don't know, Captain Rax replied, his confidence completely shattered. But we're leaving. Now. The retreat was swift and chaotic. Within minutes, the pirate ships were fleeing back into space, their crews spreading stories about an academy defended by students who laughed at death and a shadow creature that seemed to protect them. As the all-clear signal rang through the Academy, Tae-ho and his friends found themselves surrounded by security officers, teachers, and very confused fellow students. Elder Thix arrived to find the group sitting in the central hub, sharing snacks and discussing the fight like it had been a particularly interesting class exercise. "You were supposed to go to the shelters," the dean said, though he didn't sound angry. "Sorry," Tae-ho said, not looking sorry at all. "But they were threatening our friends. We couldn't just hide." "And what exactly did you do to make armed pirates flee in terror?" Kira 9 answered, their voice carrying a note of pride. "We showed them that some things are more frightening than weapons." "Such as?" "Friendship," Kira 9 said simply. "Pirates understand fear and greed. They do not understand beings who will risk everything to protect each other." Elder Thix looked around at the group of students.